Begin. Let's look through the last episodes first. That seems like a good option since I'm more likely to be facing cartoons and I will actually be going off against other things. Everyone remembers the show Doug, one of the original three Nicktoons. It seemed like a pretty normal show about the challenges a young child faced in his daily life, but I always got a weird kind of feeling from it. Compared to other kids' shows, Doug seemed more negative and anxiety-centered. Doug was always worried about something, and in most episodes he would have fantasies of everyone he knew cruelly laughing at him due to whatever problem he was facing that week. Doug always came through in the end, though, and every episode ended with him writing in his journal about how he had overcome the blown out of proportion problem. In 2005, I began to have dreams about the show for no apparent reason. I cannot remember the details, but they made me want to see the show again. The show had not ever been seen in reruns for years at that point, so I could not think of any way to see it again. To my surprise, however, it came back for 1 week in fall 2005, airing at 6 a.m. on weekdays. I watched it for all 5 days. The first 4 episodes I remembered, but they did not sync up with my memories perfectly. It had been a while, so I chalked it up to my two falls in my memories. The Friday episode, though, was something I was positive I had never seen before. It's something with the normal intro with the line drawings, but the characters never appeared. The lines continued as normal, reacting as if the normal characters were there. Once the intro ended, it switched to Doug in a dark room writing in his journal. He was not narrating his writing like he usually did. He just silently wrote for about a minute. The screen faded out, and the usual episode title screen appeared, yet there was no skit this time. There was just giant letters forming the title Doug's Real Life. The episode opened with Doug eating breakfast. He was giving a voiceover about how there was a big test he had neglected studying for. As his family was having a normal conversation, the screen started flashing. The flashes seemed to be showing something, but they did not last long enough for me to figure out what they were revealing. Doug left his house and began walking to school. During a stroll, he had one of his fantasies about his life being ruined. Mrs. Wingo announced that Doug had flunked the test, and the entire class started laughing at him, with their heads swirling around Doug. This went on for longer than most fantasies, and the laughter sounded crueler than usual. When Doug got to school, the screen flashed again. This time, it stayed on the new image, or rather the new animation style. The colors were darker, and many objects had changed color. It resembled a negative film. Doug was walking through the school hallway, which was full of kids who had never been seen on the show before. No one paid any attention to him. After Doug got to his desk, the animation switched back to normal. Suddenly, for no reason, the scene changed to after school had ended. Doug was walking home, worrying to himself about the test. Upon reaching his house, his dog Porkchop greeted him. Doug began talking to him until the screen flashed. Porkchop turned into a hunk of rotting meat, and Doug's house became decrepit. Doug went into his house and acted as if he was talking to someone, though it was completely deserted. After interacting with invisible people for a while, he sat down at an empty table. The screen flashed again, and Doug's family was there with him, eating dinner. The phone rang, and Doug's mom answered it. Doug instantly thought it was his teacher telling them about how he flunked the test. Doug had a fantasy about his parents yelling at him for failing. In it, they grew to be gigantic, and their faces became twisted and dark red. The screen flashed back to the empty house. Doug was crying and apologizing, but there was no one else in the room. He went up to his bedroom, which was completely empty except for a book and a pencil. Doug picked up the book and started writing. He narrated this time. I can't tell which one is real. Dead Bart. Okay, let's go on and do that. Now, I will say this. I don't really like Dead Bart because it's fake, so I'm going to be reading Dead Bart and a Dead Bart update. So, let's go ahead and start reading that. You know how Fox has a weird way of counting Simpsons episodes? They refuse to count a couple of them, making the amount of episodes inconsistent. The reason for this is a lost episode from season 1. Finding details about this missing episode is difficult. No one who was working on the show at the time likes to talk about it. From what has been pieced together, the lost episode was written entirely by Matt Groening. During production of the first season, Matt started to act strangely. He was very quiet, seemed nervous, and morbid. Mentioning this to anyone who has present results in them getting very angry and forbidding you to ever mention it to Matt. I first heard of it at an event where David Silverman was speaking. Someone in the crowd asked about the episode, and Silverman simply left the stage, ending the presentation hours early. The episode's production number was 7G06. The title was Dead Bart. The episode labeled 7G06, Moaning Lisa, which made later and given Dead Bart's production code to hide the latter's existence. In addition to getting angry, asking anyone who was on the show about this will cause them to do everything they can to try to stop you from directly communicating with Matt Groening. At a fan event, I managed to follow him after he spoke to the crowd, and eventually had a chance to talk to him alone as he was leaving the building. He didn't seem upset that I followed him, probably expected a typical encounter with a possessed fan. When I mentioned the lost episode, all color drained from his face and he started trembling. When I asked him if he could tell me any details, he sounded like he was on the verge of tears. He grabbed a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and handed it to me. He begged me never to mention the episode again. The piece of paper had a website address on it. I would rather not say what it was for reasons you'll see in a second. I entered the address into my browser and I came to a site that was completely black, except for a line of yellow text, a download link. I clicked on it and a file started downloading. Once the file was downloaded, my computer went crazy. It was the worst virus I ever seen. System restore didn't work, the entire computer had to be rebooted. Before doing this, I copied the file onto a CD. I tried to open it on my now empty computer and I suspected there was an episode of The Simpsons on it. The episode started off like any other episode, but had very poor quality animation. If you've seen the original animation for Some Enchanted Evening, it was similar, but less stable. The first act was fairly normal, but the way the characters acted was a little bit off. Homer seemed angrier, Bart seemed depressed, Lisa seemed anxious, Bart seemed to have general anger and hatred for his parents. The episode was about the Simpsons going on a plane trip near the end of the first act. The plane was taking off. Bart was fooling around as you'd expect. However, as the plane was about 50 feet off the ground, Bart broke a window on the plane and it was sucked out. At the beginning of the series, Matt had an idea that the animated style of The Simpsons would represent life. And that death turned things more realistic. This was used in this episode. The picture of Bart's corpse was barely recognizable. They took full advantage of it, not having to move, and made an almost photorealistic drawing of his dead body. Act 1 ended with the shot of Bart's corpse. When Act 2 started, Homer, Marge, and Lisa were sitting at their table crying. The crying went on and on. It got more pained and sounded more realistic. Better acting than you would think possible. The animation started to decay even more as they cried, and you could hear murmuring in the background. The characters could barely be made out. They were stretching and blurring, and they looked like deformed shadows with random bright colors thrown on them. There were faces looking in the window, flashing in and out, so you were never sure what they looked like. This crying went on for all of Act 2. Act 3 opened with a title card saying 1 year had passed. Homer, Marge, and Lisa were skeletally thin. And still sitting at the table, there was no sign of Maggie or the pets. They decided to visit Bart's grave. Springfield was completely deserted, and as they walked to the cemetery, the houses became more and more decrepit. They all looked abandoned. When they got to the grave, Bart's body was just lying in front of his tombstone, looking just like it did at the end of Act 1. The family started crying again. Eventually they stopped and just stared at Bart's body. The camera zoomed in on Homer's face. According to summaries, Homer tells a joke at this part, but it isn't audible in this version I saw. You can't tell what Homer is saying. The view zoomed in and out as the episode came to a close. The tombs in the background had the name of every Simpsons guest star on them, some that no one had heard of in 1989, some that haven't been on the show yet. All of them had death dates on them. For guests who died since then, like Michael Jackson and George Harrison, the dates were when they would die. The credits were completely silent and seemed handwritten. The final image was the Simpson family on their couch, like in the intros, but all drawn in a hyper-realistic, lifeless style of Bart's corpse. A thought occurred to me after seeing the episode for the first time. You could try to use the tombstones to predict the death of living Simpsons guest stars, but there is something odd about most of the ones who haven't died yet. All of their deaths are listed as the same date. Well, I had to get rid of that computer I watched the episode on. Even after a complete reformatting, it never worked correctly. The episode file can never be deleted from it, and it kept opening on its own. I wiped the hard drive clean several times, and the episode wouldn't go away. The sound control didn't work, and it was a laptop, but the power never seemed to run out, and I couldn't get it to turn off. I was going to keep the computer just so I had a copy of the episode, but looking at it was making me nervous. I had a recurring nightmare several nights in a row. The episode was playing, but instead of the photorealistic Bart corpse, it was myself at 10 years old. I found a picture of myself at 10, and the nightmare was closer to it than my own memory had been. I swear, that picture of myself at 10, dead, started flashing on the computer screen so quickly that I could never be sure after that. I destroyed the computer. I haven't been able to get the episode out of my head, though, and decided to do more research to try to understand it. I found a few people online who seemed to know about it. Apparently the episode aired once in the suburb of Portland, Oregon. I have a cousin who was watching The Simpsons during the first season and lives around there, so I asked him if he remembered the episode. He asked me how I knew about it. It was a nightmare he had that he had only told his parents about, and I was only 10 years old at the time. I told him about the episode I saw and the people online who remembered it. He thought I was just playing a prank on him, and when I got him to look at the online post about it, he screamed and hung up. He hasn't responded to any attempts I made to contact him since. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I kept searching online. I found someone who said they had a tape of it they would sell to me. I was nervous, but determined to find out the truth, and end the matter. I brought the tape as well as a really old and cheap TV/VCR, since I had a feeling neither would be the same after I watched the episode. The episode was pretty much the same as the file that downloaded. I don't want to say anymore. This wasn't worth it, and I've given anything to go back to how I felt when I had the computer while the files scaring me. I destroyed the tape, but it didn't help. The commercials on the tape, I don't want to remember them. There were monsters from my dreams I had never told anyone about. News promos about tragedies that hadn't happened yet. Surreal computer-generated animation that wouldn't have been possible in the 80s, or now for that matter, a former friend watched it with me, but he saw completely different things, with one exception. There was a seemingly live news report from June 6, 2013, in complete monotone. He recited the details of millions of people having died in their seat. Some of them waking up for a few seconds first, rambling incoherently about something that people could only piece together had something to do with nightmares. I'm sure you can figure out what date was on the tombstones of the currently alive celebrities. There was one difference in the episode. The joke Homer told was completely clear on this version. When it zooms in on Homer's face while looking at Bart, he says, "If only we were all that lucky."
Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe. And if you follow the links on screen, you can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about my website. Again.